tous, bonjour à ceux qui sont arrivés à 14h30 et rebonjour à tous ceux qui sont avec nous depuis ce matin après donc plusieurs interventions assez passionnantes dès ce matin et cet après-midi l'annonce encore de débats fort intéressants avec la session sur le travail qui va commencer très rapidement, mais aussi d'autres événements dans l'après-midi puisque, comme vous le savez, à 16h, Nicolas Hulot, qui s'occupe donc de la préparation de la COP21, qui démarre dans moins de 3 semaines, sera présent parmi nous. Et puis nous aurons d'autres sessions, bien sûr, tout aussi intéressantes, concernant notamment l'accès à l'énergie pour tous, les problèmes de l'intégration et de l'égalité. En tout cas, il est donc aujourd'hui un peu plus de 14h30. C'est donc la deuxième session plénière de ce forum. Je vous rappelle que vous pouvez suivre le forum sur Twitter en particulier, mais aussi sur les autres réseaux sociaux. Et nous allons donc maintenant nous intéresser à la place du travail dans les sociétés de demain. J'appelle donc les intervenants à me rejoindre sur scène, à commencer par Monica Flores Barragan, qui vient de Manpower Amérique latine, Isaac Getz, merci Monica, Isaac Getz de l'ESCP Europe, Thierry Jadot, le PDG de Dentsu Aegis, Greg Lindsay de l'Atlantic Council Foresight Initiative et Lord Skidelski, membre du conseil du forum. Merci Robert. Et bien sûr, le modérateur Eugenio Occorsio, qui est rédacteur en chef de La Repubblica, l'un de nos partenaires médias, bien entendu. Générique. Eugenio, la parole est à vous.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry for speaking English, but you know, as I thought of my friends, to speak a bad French in France would be unforgivable. So I prefer to stay on English, but I know that there is a simultaneous translation. We are here to talk about the place for human labor in tomorrow's societies, which is an issue crucial, of course, and still unresolved. Let me first read a few lines from a report just issued by Bank of America Merrill Lynch, which says that robots, the android machines, are likely to be performing 45% of manufacturing tasks by 2025 versus 10% today. But aside this, there is another notation which says adoption of robots and other items of artificial intelligence could boost productivity by 30% in many industries and cutting manufacturing labor cost by 33%. So we are facing a real revolution. In the meantime, we are asking ourselves and to the experts like now what will be about our jobs, our traditional jobs, our traditional working relations, and which jobs will emerge, because I understand that not everybody can go to make the hyper technicians of cloud computing or other computer analysis very deeply involved with the new technology. So we have to find a place in our society. but everyone has to realize that the society, the world is changing. So in this section of this segment of the Forum Nouveau Monde, we try to analyze to see what are these changes. And here to help us to understand better are a few real experts which already have been introduced. And let me first speak with Monica Flores Barragan. She is managing director of Manpower, which is a pristine, maybe the first in the world agency of temporary, which once was, because the times are changing so rapidly that not anymore you can change them temporary works. How do you change it? What do you call what the Manpower does?
Okay, is it okay? We are Manpower Group. We have different brands. The most famous one is Manpower, which does exactly staffing, which is temporary work around the world. But we have other brands that does headhunting or human resources consultancy. So we see all the cycle of human labor for a company and for an individual. We have presence in 80 countries. We attend like 400,000 clients. And I say that because we have fresh information from all of them. We interview like 10 million people per year, and we place like 3.7 million people per day. So we have information of what is happening in the labor market. And before talking about the future, let me tell you something that is happening now, and that is a challenge for employers now and will be a challenge in the future. We have a scarcity of talent, and you know all that. And we do a survey every year. We interview like 40,000 employers, asking if they have problems to fulfill vacancies. 38% at the global level say that they have problems. In some countries like Mexico, 54% of them have problems. In Japan, 83% of employers have problems to fill the current vacancies. The future will be worse. And the main thing is that we have a lot of people looking for a job, but we have also a lot of employees looking for talent. And there is not a match between people, what they know to do, and the knowledge they have with the needs of the companies. So this will create a great tension in the labor market. We see that most of the employers are looking for soft skills, and countries and schools in general are focusing in traditional academy, traditional school, titles, PhD, master degrees, but we don't exactly need that. That is useful, but what we need is soft skill, communication, virtual collaboration, solving problems, asking the right questions, analysis. And not all the educational systems in the world are looking for that kind of skills that we need now and the future. And that will be the difference between a robot and a human being. Because the future jobs will be those who create value, that innovate, that needs emotional intelligence, and that have this human touch with these right skills at the right place at the right cost.
Okay. So we have found out that we are not robots so far, which is very interesting. But we are facing a change, and I'm talking to Isaac Getz, who is a professor of leadership and innovation management. The work is not anymore the same in many ways. For instance, there has been recently the development of the so-called smart work, which means no office anymore, no cubicle, no hierarchy between boss and workers, something different, which is based on the responsibility of the worker, of course, because if it's left free, which is of course a welcome thing, he has to be responsible because the job has to be done. And how can we see this new kind of work in the future?
I'll surprise you a little bit. I think that the most urgent problem today that corporations are facing is child labor. You're surprised? I'll tell you why. It's not because I think that child labor has to be banned, has to be eliminated from corporations, because today corporations, structures, infantilize and deresponsibilize the majority of employees. Because of that, the vast majority of employees who have ideas, who want to take initiatives, cannot doing that. They are complacent or they are rebellious. In order to liberate, it's not a good sound here, in order to liberate this initiative, this creativity that is in corporations, these talents, but they are latent talents, they are not real talents. We need to dramatically transform the way the workplace today is organized. And it's not only a utopian dream, it is happening at the tune of about one company every week in France is going into this transformation, including companies like Michelin, Decathlon, and hundreds of small and medium companies.
I see. That is an interesting new picture which opens. And Thierry Jadot, who is the CEO of Dentsu Aegis Network, which is a pristine, how to say, advertising, public relation, everything connected, communication company, is the chief for Southern Europe and Middle East, if I'm not wrong. Do you find that the situation is in place, or no? Just more in general, what is your opinion, being a decision maker in this issue, this field?
I'm going to talk speak in French, if you're okay with that. Le secteur des médias et de la communication, si j'en crois les études des grands instituts, c'est sans doute le secteur qui est actuellement le plus disrupté, celui qui va continuer à l'être dans les années qui viennent. Pourquoi ? Parce que les usages sont bouleversés et on le voit au quotidien. J'ai un chiffre en tête, on est 2 heures sur son portable par jour aujourd'hui, on sera 5 heures sur son portable en 2020. On consomme les médias de façon très différente de la façon dont on les consommait avant. Pour la première fois dans l'histoire, on voit le nombre de postes de télévision diminuer dans les foyers, et tout ça va aller en s'accélérant. Dans nos métiers de communication, il y a 2 endroits qui vont être significativement bouleversés. C'est le fait que la data est devenue notre monnaie principale d'échange avec les médias comme avec nos clients. Et que le fait de manipuler de la data va nous permettre de plus en plus de pouvoir accéder à des consommateurs en temps réel avec un message qui est tout à fait adapté à leurs besoins qu'on aura estimés. Et ce travail-là, il va de plus en plus passer par des algorithmes, ce qui va sans doute bouleverser un certain nombre de métiers dans notre business et en faire disparaître. Parce qu'un algorithme, ça fonctionne quasiment tout seul, ça a besoin de technologie, ça a besoin de data et ça a besoin de quelques ingénieurs. Et donc tous ceux qui, sans aucun doute, achetaient des médias de façon traditionnelle par le passé, vont devoir leur métier significativement évoluer. Et il y a un autre univers au-delà de cette explosion du programmatique. Le programmatique, c'est 15 milliards de dollars aujourd'hui, c'est 150 milliards d'ici 2020. Il y a un autre univers qui est en train d'être bouleversé, c'est tout l'univers du contenu. Parce que le nombre de canaux est en train d'exploser, comme la nature a horreur du vide, on voit de plus en plus de créatifs, de créateurs qui sont en train d'alimenter ces canaux de contenu et d'œuvres. Et donc finalement, d'un côté, on voit un univers qui s'automatise et peut-être des métiers qui évoluent, voire qui disparaissent, mais à côté de ça, on voit un univers de la création qui, lui, est en train d'exploser du fait de la progression des usages. Alors ça a une incidence évidemment dans notre quotidien, ça veut dire qu'il faut trouver effectivement, vous le disiez tout à l'heure, des profils différents, pas seulement des profils experts, mais des profils experts qui savent, qui connaissent la culture de l'autre, parce que dans ce monde des médias de plus en plus convergents, il faut à la fois savoir parler télévision, mais également canaux digitaux, radio, objets connectés demain, nanotechnologie après-demain. Et donc les profils ont changé. Et est-ce que les entreprises sont prêtes effectivement à travailler différemment? Je pense qu'elles le sont. Est-ce qu'elles sont armées pour le faire? Il faut qu'elles soient davantage aidées. Souvent, elles le font trop en interne. Il faut qu'elles soient plus connectées avec de l'open innovation pour être influencées par des startups. Il y a deux types de boîtes. Il y a les startups et puis les autres. Les startups ont un héritage et on n'a pas d'héritage alors que les autres ont un héritage. Donc c'est bien plus facile pour les startups finalement de se convertir à ce nouveau monde. Et il est important pour les entreprises qui ont un héritage finalement de se connecter en réseau à ce profil d'entreprise qui va les aider à se transformer dans des modes plus collaboratifs avec des structures évidemment moins hiérarchiques et puis de lutter contre la consanguinité qui est un vrai obstacle à l'innovation.
Okay. Of course, high-tech companies and media companies are more, if not other, because they are new, just appeared, but or anyway not old. They are favorite in this adapting to the new realities of world. But the companies are not only of this pristine and new sector. Greg Linsday, who is a fellow of the Atlantic Council in America, you have been the first to experience new jobs, new realities. What is your opinion on this issue? What must we expect from the...
I want to take a step back further because the work that I work on at the Atlantic Council in Washington, we're looking particularly at the phenomenon of the megacity and what it means as strategic challenges and opportunities to US policymakers. And I'm a cities person, that's mostly what I write and research. And to me, it's a very interesting question, the future of human labor, because from the perspective of cities, cities are the past, present, and future of human labor. They are the original growth machines, not corporations, attracting rural migrants into them, creating jobs, creating the middle class. They are the machines that generate the middle class. Jane Jacobs formulated as such. So to me, it's very interesting when we talk about the panic about robots today. There was, of course, 10 years ago, there was a different debate, a panic about the fact that the urban growth machine had stalled, that essentially China, the Chinese growth model, was going to, in perpetuity, keep organized labor there. They were going to be able the ones to bring in workers from the countryside, and that Africa would never really have a chance to develop along the Southeast Asian model that way. And if you remember this, Mike Davis, the Marxist economic geographer, wrote this apocalyptic book called Planet of Slums that was extremely well sourced in the raw data. And he basically argued that we already had 1 billion people on this planet who were superfluous and would never actually enter the formal work sphere of that. And I think that was overblown somewhat. Today we talk about it in terms of the robots. We think of the robots stealing these jobs. And to me it's interesting because, of course, when we say the notion that automation will destroy jobs, what do we really mean? It's not that it's going to put people out of work per se, it's that it's going to push them out of the formal sector into the informal one. And this is what we've seen, of course, across the global south in very famous slums like Kibera in Nairobi and Dharavi in India, and of course the millions of others that do not have brand names, where of course, if you want to see the most entrepreneurial people in the world, they are there working every single day, hustling every single moment of their lives. And often because they have been denied credit, they have been denied all the sort of various access points into the formal system. So when I think about the robots we were discussing earlier, the notion of this, to me the problem with the notion of turning labor into capital in the form of automation and doing that enough is that eventually, sooner or later, you continue to push people into this informal underclass, and then we pretend they no longer exist or we refuse to help them. And so I think this is a particularly problem facing Europe right now with the whole waves of immigration coming in with the refugees. What will nations like Germany do with its unfilled jobs of this? I mean, it has the capacity in the formal sector to absorb them into it. But if it chooses not to, these people aren't just going to sit there. They're going to form black markets. They're going to form all the sort of underground illicit activities that people are afraid of when they think of informal, or they think of the informal economy. So I think we really need to think particularly about, how do we actually sort of bring these people into formal work? Or how do we basically, enfranchise them to actually take their informal jobs and make them more formal? Because just as a point to your original question, in the United States, we're going in reverse of this. It's interesting to me that when people want to talk about, I hope we come back to this, about Uber and transportation network companies and Airbnb, I look at this, the sharing economy is a slum economy. It's exactly what people do in informal settlements when they have no recourse to the formal sector. In the United States, we claim we're doing it because people trust each other more, and so therefore we're willing to let strangers stay at our house. We're doing it because the people who are doing that are the victims of austerity of that, and so we're seeing the formal sector in America get dismantled a little bit in the name of progress and liberation, when really it's starting to resemble more of the informal economies that we see already across the global south. So I think we need to start thinking about where the line between the formal and informal is, and figure out, how do we enfranchise and ennoble the informal sector here, because the formal one seems to be shrinking.
It's interesting that you mentioned Airbnb, as if I remember well, that, as you said, has been exploded. Has been successful so much in America because America has a tradition of trust each other, of people who trust each other, so they can also exchange their home, their everything for without problems. Which is an interesting angle. As I said, I had not thought about it, that in Europe we are maybe more resistant to this approach of putting things in common.
With many good reasons. There's, of course, there's very strong pushback against parts of the sharing economy in the States right now because of what it does for public safety, for what it does for having untrained riders, drivers in the case of Uber and some of the other transportation network companies. There's reasons we set up formal protections in these fields in the first place.
Okay, we'll talk about it later, if possible. Lord Skidelsky, you are an economist at Warwick University, and of course the issue of new jobs, new ways to intend the work are familiar to you, but I want to ask you, you're the right person to ask it, is not a danger to lose conquers we have not fighted, but anyway, trouble for centuries with these new jobs. Inequality, labor, safety, and things like this. Not we going back on these issues, especially safety and the work.
Sorry, what's the danger that you identified just then?
There is, in this new concept of the work, there are, not say privileges, but guarantees which have been conquered by workers along the years, the centuries, which are going to be lost because it's less guaranteed a job given in freedom, a job given for it's interesting, job given for a little period of time, a new job, a new form of job. What I suggest to you is real or is a problem of the past, a danger of, is not a danger?
No, I think it is a danger. You're talking about the increase in insecurity, and that is certainly a fact. You're talking about the reduced quality of many, many jobs, which are becoming casualized. That's a fact. What do these things reflect? I do think they reflect increasing pressure on what Greg called the formal economy, and a tendency to allow people redundant in the formal economy to go into the informal economy where you can forget about them. It's interesting that ever since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, economists have talked about redundant populations. Ricardo did as well in his chapter on machinery. In his Principles of Political Economy. And the fear of a population being made redundant by machines has always been there. Hitherto, it's always been overcome because, in fact, new jobs have been created as old jobs became mechanized. But I think the new factor that's happened is the tremendous acceleration of technical progress, and particularly of automation. Moore's law is one of the examples of that. And so it's no longer a question of gradual adjustment. It's these things might happen very, very quickly. And that's why I rather mistrust some of the paradigm, which is that humans now face a new challenge. We've got to race with machines that are becoming more and more, becoming cleverer and cleverer, whose algorithms are becoming more and more sophisticated, and therefore we have to keep raising the level of human intelligence in order to cope with that. And so there's an endless race between humans and machines. Look, if we look at it in that way, the machines are bound to win. There's no doubt about it. The amount of jobs that will be distinctively human or require distinctively human attributes are going to shrink in number. Therefore, I think this is the wrong paradigm. And what the right paradigm is something we might come to a little later.
So, Greg, you have something to add on this issue? Isaac, so Isaac gets.
Can you hear me? Yes?
Hope so.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you said that maybe there is some kind of extinction of salaried jobs in these liberated companies that they're mentioning. Not at all. In fact, there are corporations and companies, but also ministries in Belgium. There are 2 ministries functioning like that. Army units. Any kind of organization where you have human beings can basically be based, I'm doing it black and white, on 2 paradigms. The one is a dominating paradigm. It's what I'm calling a hierarchical bureaucracy, where every superior level is supposed to direct the level below him, and to help himself in this activity, he'll put out all kinds of procedures. That's where you get bureaucracy. This is a traditional way. It keeps the organization running with all the processes and procedures. The hidden cost of it, the person who is supposedly is the only one, he is in the zone of creating an economic value, which is a frontline employee, is not asked to think. He is asked to execute. How you can get out of this predicament? The situation is terrible. In France, only 9%, I'm giving you Gallup Q12 employee engagement survey, only 9% of people are engaged, which is they come every morning, they're happy to be at work, and they come to contribute with their ideas, with their intelligence to the success of their company. 65% in France, they're coming just for a paycheck because they have to work somewhere. And 26%, they're coming to sabotage their company. They're so unhappy at work that they come every day to show their unhappiness, and their best way is to sabotage the work of the engaged people. That's the situation. You want to be playing in Champions League, and you have only 1 guy, 2 guys in team of 11 who really want to win. How can you change the situation? That is the essence of liberated companies. And that means that you have to start from the top. And the number 1 step at the top is to abandon your ego. Because if you're head of a company, the head of a business unit, and you think that you're the most intelligent person, you'll put in place the structures so that your intelligence trickles down to the lowest levels, and that these people will simply execute what you decide. If you abandon that and you're capable to say, I don't know what is the solution to our challenges. You know, because you're facing the clients. You are facing all the trends and all the changes in technology, and my job is to create conditions where you can be creative, you can take initiative. And that's how you bring human into corporations instead of human resources.
So let's see that this revolution in work market may be an occasion to get more motivation by the people to finally do every day a job they love, they like, with motivations precise and definite, and toward the definite accomplishment, which is very interesting. Thierry, how do you think about it in your field? Is this a common pattern?
Je partage la vision. Alors, je suis peut-être moins pessimiste parce que j'ai l'occasion de rencontrer beaucoup de clients qui se sont engagés dans des process ou qui mettent en place des process collaboratifs pour faire en sorte que c'est particulièrement vrai en France parce que, je veux dire, nos structures, j'allais dire presque issues des Lumières, où il y a ceux qui savent et ceux qui ne savent pas, fait que globalement, les hiérarchies sont tenues par 5% des effectifs. Et que dans les 95% restants, il y a des relais. Les relais, on les appelle des cadres. Et je ne sais pas si vous voyez, alors pour ceux qui comprennent bien le français, le mot cadre a presque disparu de notre vocabulaire. Ça veut bien dire que ce métier-là, ou cette fonction-là, est en train de disparaître. La seule façon de remédier à cela, c'est effectivement que ce soit une décision du top management et pas quelque chose qui est délégué à des experts dont le seul métier serait de s'assurer de la transformation de l'entreprise. C'est le top manager qui peut faire ça. Et c'est comment aussi on peut, à travers des plans de formation qui non seulement se concentrent, parce que c'est ce qu'on a tous fait, on s'est tous concentrés sur les 5% de l'élite de nos organisations en disant ceux-là, ça va être les managers de demain. Et on a parfois laissé sur le bord de la route 95% de la population. C'est comment désormais on les fait également monter dans le train de la transformation numérique. Et puis j'allais rajouter qu'il y a quand même une étape qu'il ne faut pas négliger, c'est l'école. C'est comment est-ce qu'on fait pour apprendre à nos enfants à gagner en autonomie dans ce monde qui, jusqu'à présent, était un monde où 95% d'entre eux allaient exécuter, comment désormais on leur fait apprendre l'autonomie dans un monde qui est de plus en plus complexe et qui ne va pas cesser de l'être. J'ai un exemple je m'occupe également d'Israël. Et Israël, comme vous le savez sans doute, ils sont extrêmement forts dans les nouvelles technologies, les startups, etc. Mais ce qu'on ignore parfois, c'est qu'ils sont très bons dans les formats audiovisuels. Eh bien, la façon dont ils ont créé cette créativité dans les formats audiovisuels, c'est qu'à l'époque du brevet des collèges, eh bien, tous les enfants non seulement rendent des copies, mais également proposent un projet audiovisuel. Et ça crée des vocations et ça rend ce pays extrêmement créatif dans l'univers de l'audiovisuel.
Okay, sorry, but the machine, by the way, of new jobs is not working properly. Anyway, I have something to add, Monica.
Yeah, I agree with most of the things that have been mentioned by my colleagues, but I really think that we need to start talking about jobs in a different way. Not more full-time employers, no more salary-paid positions, because we won't need that. That's why we have new business models like Uber, Airbnb, and Alibaba, and all these new business models that raise in 15 years, and they are in the top 500 of the list of Fortune. And all companies with all leadership are getting old, and they are not making money. They need to change. But to do that change, we need to change leaderships to accomplish what you've been mentioned. But the other point that I want to raise that I think is very important, we need to think about, not in France, not in Europe, we need to think in the countries that have population. Population in Europe is shrinking, are getting older and older. Japan has a challenge with talent. At some point, countries will need to look for other countries with a demographical bonus. You will need to look for Latin America, for Asia, for Africa. And if we don't have in those countries the studies and the training to fulfill the positions that you can't, we will be in serious problems, all of us, because we have this double squeeze. In some countries, a demographic bonus with unprepared populations, and in other countries that are developed, but they don't have talent to fulfill the positions that the retirement is leaving. So we need to work in this global business world, but with the challenge of local governments And we are forgetting that talent is mobile. So the best talents in each country will move to another. But there is a law that protects the job for the locals. We need to forget about all these rules, and that will be the future of the mobile talent in a new world of work. Robots or not robots, that will happen anyway.
So we arrived at the crucial point of all this issue, which is divided in two parts. What can you, as a young person, as a young student or person who is at the windows of the life, much younger than us, can you expect? Where would you direct your efforts, your preparation or formation to get a job of really satisfaction, not to finish like the 60% of people who go just to office? And second is on the opposite, on the other side, is what the universities should teach to these people to get ready to the new world.
Well, I would take, I guess, two of those points. One particularly, one is a warning, because I see in the United States. I'm very skeptical of what is becoming a sort of consensus in the States, at least, that the spiraling student debt that we face in America is going to lead eventually to a flowering of new forms of online-based education and credentialing, which I think falls into an argument where that lacks social capital, right? I can imagine that the United States, for example, is going to be is headed towards a two-tier educational system where those who have the ability to afford to go to a 4-year physical university will do so and will build abundant social capital with those who will provide their network in life. And then there will be a vast underclass that will go to online and perhaps quasi-physical institutions where they will emerge with credentials but no actual way to actually get hired. And so I'm worried that we're going to create a sort of new educational underclass / bubble that way. But I think it gets to the crux of the issues, and this is something that I'm researching now, which is the notion of what are the post-corporate forms of organizing workers? And this goes back to, I think, Isaac's engagement question, too. I don't know how familiar you are with Ronald Coase, but this is the Nobel Prize-winning economist who 75 years ago talked about why corporations exist. And the answer was, ultimately, is that when transaction costs, the costs of finding, identifying talent, bringing them house, organizing work, when they're very high, you end up with very large, vertically integrated corporations. And when they're very low, as they are in an era of abundant communications, as they are right now, they end up dispersing. And so we're not going to see everybody working for themselves, but I do think that there's an era, and we can already see traces of it everywhere, of these sort of new forms of more ad hoc ways of organizing work. And Uber is one, but I'm much more interested in sort of the European phenomenon that spawned co-working, which is the notion of going to a workplace where you work alongside other people who are not necessarily your colleagues. And we know in studies that people who do this, and this is of course a form of white-collar knowledge work, the people who do this are happier, they're more engaged, they're more productive because they're working alongside people who are similar peers and interests. And so one of the things I'm researching right now is, how do we basically start turning these into the 21st century of guilds or Scuola Grandi, in the sense of, structures that can basically create emergent new teams or forms of companies. How do we start breaking down the barriers functionally between the way companies work together? I think it's fascinating, for example, that, that large companies spend billions of dollars on information technology to integrate them with their partners and their vendor systems, but yet an office is still one organization in one space. You almost never see organizations sharing workspaces and sharing ideas together. That's madness. We should have a whole system where you basically have companies and independent workers are working together and spawning projects and teams. And so that's one of the things, like I said, I'm following this, where we're trying to imagine this sort of new ecosystem. New in the United States, we're talking about platform cooperatives, basically small business owner-owned versions of Uber, where you basically see local taxi drivers form their own co-ops and do this. I'm very curious about whether we can spawn more examples of this that are not just these very, very large-scale networks which dictate orders from the top, but allow something to come from the bottom up. And of course, this is always discussed from the solution of technology, but really it's a policy problem, and it's a question of favoring local businesses over what is the fastest, cheapest, easiest solution, which is the button on your phone that says Uber.
Thierry, I know that you have something to say about Uberization of the economy. There's something more to say.
I think I've got something to say as well. So, go ahead.
I think Uber is going to be Uberized as well. So, one who has Uberized the economy is going to be Uberized as well, because you have, the chauffeur who say that we're going to invent a new platform and maybe one day they're going to have no chauffeur to drive the cars. So, of course, I prefer talking about disruption of some of big sectors, just like insurance, banking system, and the automotive industry. And, you know, maybe part of their future competitors are Uber company type of it, but most of these company, we're going to have competitors who will have integrated better the digital revolution into their current processes.
But urbanization is the same than sharing economy?
No.
Or a different concept? Explain the difference, because often is confused between urbanization and sharing economy.
I don't know.
Sharing is Airbnb.
Yeah, okay, but Uber, just to compare with what happened in France, Uber is just people who wants to have access to a car in the street in 5 minutes. So G7, for instance, will have been perfectly able with the technology to create the same platform than Uber. You see what I mean? It's just not sharing things. Uber Pop is sharing, but Uber is not sharing. You have a real chauffeur, he has a salary, and it's just, it's upgraded of what you had so far, with people smiling.
Maybe it's a way to become entrepreneurs in 1 minute. If you put together an app or a group of people, you start a sort of Uber, and you become employer.
Okay, but Uber is different because Uber, they have something like 50,000 chauffeurs, so they have employees. They dream of not having employees in the future when you can drive the car without chauffeur. What is true is that you have so many platforms just like Airbnb or others who have a lot of big value and almost no employees. And this is a challenge because all these guys will certainly have a lot of money and they will all create, just like Google. Google is only 50,000 people. It's very small for one of the biggest companies worldwide. When you compare to Volkswagen, 600,000 people. So, but Google creates value, and what is true is that those guys have a lot of money, and they create their own small industry or their small enterprise around each of the Google employee. And this is how certainly the workforce is going to be split between tech-savvy people and people who work for these tech-savvy people.
Yes. Zelensky, you have something to say?
Yeah, well, I think this is all, I mean, it's a huge subject. I think a lot of this is simply not getting to the heart of the problem. Because what a lot of the implications of what's being said is we're going to create a two-class, even more of a two-class society, a society of people with savvy and a society of people who are servants of the savvy in one way or another. Now, all this talk of improving motivation in companies, the organizational language, is what Marx would call a form of false consciousness, unless it's accompanied by increase in real salaries of the mass of the people. And no one's talked about inequality. No one has talked about the fact that the way our economies are organized and increasingly organized are just going to lead to more and more inequality and sharper and sharper divisions between a top elite and a bottom. Now, I mean, was it Greg? No, it wasn't. It was Isaac Getz. You were talking about top-down hierarchies and then flatter hierarchies. Will the flatter hierarchies generate more equality of income? Why should they? Through what process is that going to happen? You can't really talk about any of this outside political choices that we have to face. Otherwise, it's a bit of waffle, actually. I mean, we're all in favor of lovely jobs. We're all in favor of treating everyone well. We're all in favor of education that increases the human capacities of people. But that's really beside the point. We live in a political system which is condemning more and more people to dead-end jobs. I mean, these are very low-salary jobs we've been talking about in these flat structures and also with these very, very small businesses. They're very low wage. And the fact is that, in fact, real wages have not gone up in the last 30 years over much of Western Europe. In fact, there's been a stagnation of median incomes. And the way we're discussing things, we don't regard it as a problem and are quite happy for it to continue. So I think the discussion is off beam, I'm afraid, unless and until we actually get concentrated on the issue of wealth and income inequality and its growth in our societies.
Let me, before giving the word to Isaac, let me read a few news I found out while preparing for this afternoon. I found out that between 14th and 18th century, 13 and 1700, the GNP per capita in England didn't grow more than a mere 0.2% for a year. In the 19th century, the century of the Industrial Revolution, that pace increased to 1%. In the 20th century, to 2.5%. All this was due to the development of manufacturing. Today, in the advanced world, the role of manufacturing is reduced again. Vice versa is growing in emerging markets. How is this connection between manufacturing and raising wages? First, listen to Isaac.
I'm not a theoretician. I'm not an economist. I'm right now a researcher. I'm changing subjects, right? In organizations, I studied 330 countries, observing them like anthropologist. And what I'm writing about is what I saw. It's not a wishful thinking, right? So I'll give you an example of the oldest liberated company in France, which is a foundry. I mean, the more old world industry than the foundry that manufactures parts for cars, you can't find. You can't. And they operating that way that I described you since 1983. I'm answering immediately the objection of Lord Sedelsky. These people, this company, they're about 600, they have a gain-sharing plan. This gain-sharing plan, because they produce a superior economic value than all their competitors, allow them to have, in France, most of the companies have like 13 salaries, right? Instead of 12 months, they have 13 months. They have 16, 17, 18 months of salaries for a baseline operator. That's unheard of anywhere. This is one thing. Second thing, from Picardy, France, they export to China. Should I repeat it 3 times or not? They export to China because in the last 30 years, they didn't raise the price of their part for a car, and they have 70% of the European market in their part, not even by 1 cent, not even to adjust to inflation. Never for 30 years. They are cheaper than Chinese. Thanks to what? Thanks to intelligence, creativity, initiative of the operators. Not only that all that raise in productivity, reduction in cost, and so on, cover inflation, it also covers the productivity increases. As you know, if you work for Renault, PSA, or Volkswagen, you have to sell the same part every year 3 or 5% less. They cover that, and they produce enough of profits for gain sharing. This is not the case of one company, of hundreds of companies. You have to understand one thing, that today employees in companies, that's the current situation of the labor, they work at 20, 30% of their potential. They're Charlie Chaplins. They're told what to do. They're not told to think. They're told to check your brain before you enter the company. Don't forget to pick it up when you leave, because you need it at home, not at the workplace. Now imagine that these people, they are at 100%. They're 150%, that many of them have a talent. But no one cares. And they are supported in this company to become what their potential is that they ignored. Can you imagine what this company is capable to do? How can they resist in the industry where everyone is in India and China, and they beat Chinese?
What's their wages?
I told you.
You told me the wages of the foundry. What about the people in who
China.
are exporting to China? What's
They
happening?
are exporting to China from France, and they have 30–40% higher salaries than their competitors in Europe because they produce this economic value and they produce this surplus after their action holders, it's a family company, are paid after the investments are decided by themselves. They don't have directors who decide investments. They have people who operate machines that decide what machines they want to replace. And after that, they have enough money to share. And that's not the only company. There are many industrial companies. There are service companies. There are ministries. They can operate. People can operate that way. If you start to stop to bother them, they finally can do their job. Instead of filling in reports, do you know what's the percentage of time that top management spends on reporting and budgeting? You know that? 30% of their time. And all that to control people and tell them what to do.
Yeah, but
it's crazy.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is very good, and at the micro level, of course, a lot of this is happening, but the big data are against you. There's been actually a decrease in productivity.
I totally agree with you. This is a minor phenomenon. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, okay.
I want it to be a major phenomenon. There are hundreds of companies, there are not thousands. However, the largest corporations like Michelin, like Decathlon moved into that. Those are not small companies. And the numbers are increasing. If we reach 7% of the top French 2,050 companies, which are above 500 people, we're going to shift the economy into that direction.
So you think that doing things this way is going to raise productivity and enable real wages to go up, to reverse the trend of the last 20 or 30 years, and without any other mechanism than just flat hierarchies?
No, you can't. It's not flat hierarchies. I never use the term. There are no hierarchies whatsoever, right?
Okay.
It's self-directed teams. It's no McGregor. Maybe you've read about the theory why. Is this something that you observe? There are different other ways to coordinate work. Of course, they are serious people. They work for Volkswagen, they work for Renault, they do top quality and so on. And there are banks operating like that. There are advertisement agencies operating like that. I mean, armies operating like that. I mean, not armies, but special forces and so on and so on. But overly, that's what happens. You have a lot of hidden costs, a lot of potential in the traditional organization. And those organizations that have so many diseconomies that they are underperforming. They have a potential. There are talents and people that are not used. And these people, they work at 20–30% of their capable to do. When they start doing at 100% of their potential, the economic value is there, they generate it, and they can share it. Not only, Lord Sadelsky, not only among themselves, but with the society. It's very important. Also with the society.
All this is due to globalization in part, is one aspect of globalization. This morning we learned from the words of Secretary Gurria, that globalization is a little in crisis because of the slowdown of the economy in China, but also in Brazil, in Russia. And what I suggest to you, Mrs. Monica Flores, the fact that in big parts of the world, very important part of the world. This morning I read on Financial Times, Lawrence Summers, the former Secretary of the Treasury of America, says that this time we have to realize that China matters for the world economy as the world economy matters for China. So what can we, how does your work, your activity change with this new situation which is going on? This is future, this near future actually.
Yeah, obviously we live in a global world, and anything that happens in China or in Australia or in Brazil will impact the rest of the world. And in terms of employers, we need to understand that global business model, and we need to fight for the best talent in order to do what this company is doing, the best talent, increasing productivity and efficiency, because all the companies are in more pressure than ever, and we need to survive. And the only way to survive is increasing efficiency and productivity, and we need the best talent to do that, and we are fighting for talent. And that will create probably an inflation of wages in certain sectors, and probably will increase the difference between the ones that knows to do something and the others that do not know what to do. Ones with a connection to internet and those people that do not have access to internet, because technology is changing the world of work, and because having access to internet and social networks will change the path of every individual. I think that in this globalization, social networks are playing a key role in what is happening with jobs and how activities are changing. For example, in the morning they mentioned Watson. Watson is changing the way that doctors are doing their jobs, and is making that some positions in hospitals and laboratories are disappearing. And at the end, in the future, probably we will not be looking for an individual to have a full-time job or a part-time job. They will be working in social networks, creating value to companies. And there are now web pages in which you can set a bid. I'm looking for this kind of design, I'm looking for this kind of job, and people from all around the world put their proposal. And then, yes, in social networks. That will change what we are discussing now, because jobs will not be in the same way. Young people is not looking for a job as we did in the past. They don't want to work for one company for the rest of their life.
And also a place for people to change information about how they work in a field in Brazil or in Russia, or social networks being global, Facebook and Twitter. LinkedIn is professional, but,
LinkedIn is
but for
Twitter,
exchanging of information among young workers, Facebook, how do we do this way? We earn that amount. We earn one of the aspects of the changing of the world.
Yeah, social networks are changing the path of companies and the expectation of individuals, and the social phenomena is that young people has a global expectation, very similar. Yeah. It doesn't matter if they live in China or in US or in Nicaragua.
The global village.
The global expectations.
Village.
Yes.
You know, I wonder whether you ever meet young people. I mean, I lecture a lot at universities, I lecture a lot at students. Most of them are desperately insecure. They don't know what their future's going to bring, and they're very, very afraid they won't get jobs, very much afraid they won't achieve the living standards of their parents. And that's why they've become quite radical students all over the Western world. They're not looking forward to this wonderful world you're describing at all. They're very worried about their future, and they're right to be. They're right to be. So I simply sometimes fail to connect with some of these remarks. It's not what I experience when I meet a lot of young people, which I do fairly regularly.
Thierry, un moment, then Isaac.
Juste dire deux mots, parce que je donne effectivement également des cours à Sciences Po aux étudiants étrangers, et je sens aussi cette préoccupation pour le futur. Le combat pour les talents tel qu'on l'imagine, c'est un combat de riches. Le problème, ce n'est pas tellement tous ces gens-là qui finiront par avoir un travail. Ces gens-là, ce qui les intéresse, c'est travailler sur des projets. Ils ne vont plus, sans aucun doute, adhérer à une entreprise sur l'ensemble de la carrière. Ils vont y travailler 3 ans, ils vont aller faire autre chose, et puis après, ils reviendront. Ils n'ont pas envie, quand je les écoute, d'imiter ou de reproduire le schéma parental où on a fait 40 ans de vie professionnelle dans une seule entreprise. Ils se lancent, même à Sciences Po, ils se lancent dans des start-up. Moi, je suis surpris par voir le nombre d'auto-entrepreneurs ou de jeunes entrepreneurs qui veulent se lancer dans la vie active à travers des projets. Donc ça, et ça ne veut pas dire qu'ils sont sereins sur l'avenir. Ça ne veut pas dire qu'ils sont sereins sur l'avenir. Moi, ce qui me préoccupe plus, c'est la masse de gens qui vont subir l'automatisation dans un certain nombre d'entreprises et qui risquent de se retrouver avec des jobs moins qualifiés et moins rémunérés que ceux qu'ils avaient lorsqu'ils étaient ouvriers qualifiés en usine. C'est ces gens-là dont il faut absolument s'occuper si on ne veut pas se retrouver dans la situation qu'a décrit Jean-Paul Fitoussi tout à l'heure, c'est-à-dire des inégalités tellement gigantesques que ça menace la démocratie.
Inequalities are a big problem, which is strictly connected and still unsolved about this situation. I understand that inequalities, on the other hand, is a fact that inequalities are growing all over in the industrialized world and the emerging countries, and we have to do something about it. Isaac.
I won't speak about inequalities, but I will speak. I can if you want, but I don't want to take all the stage, right? So other people. But I want to we are colleagues, right? And I fully acknowledge that I'm a professor in an elite school, an elite business school in France. I'm teaching what I'm telling you here, right, to students. And the reaction is that professor you're doing a terrible thing to us. And the first time they told me, I was surprised. Why? And I said, you are describing as these companies, but there are maybe several hundred, maybe 1,000 all over the world. I don't know. But we will not work in these companies. We will work in the traditional companies. We will be crushed by this whole what's called hierarchical pyramid, and we'll have to wait 10 years until we can change an office and have 2 windows or maybe 1 window. They all in my school did internships. And I always ask them this question, how many of you, and usually the internships are in large corporations, you know, in serious companies. How many of you were bored, at least several days during your internship? How many hands raised do you think? What's the percentage? And they are doing internship because they are supposedly in elite school, so they have brains, right? They have intelligence. They should be used to produce something, be creative. What's the percentage of hands raising? Almost 100. They are scared, but not for the reason Lord Sadelsky, you told. They're scared to go there and be bored to death.
I don't agree. You see, I think where we disagree, and it's a very good disagreement to have, I don't think that the problem is hierarchical structures. I don't think that's at the core of the problem. When hierarchical structures, as they were in the past, were associated with security and good rising incomes, I don't think people were, they may have been bored quite a bit of the time. I mean, most jobs have large elements of boredom in them, let's face it, even my job, okay? But that wasn't the issue. These structures were dissolved because of decisions taken. I mean, partly technology dissolved them, partly political decisions. Globalization was a political decision as much as a technologically determined. It was really a project to escape from national regulation. Now, so that I think is where we disagree. But to answer your question, moderator, you gave some 19th century data and 20th century data, and you asked the question, what is the connection between manufacturing and the increase in productivity? Well, I mean, it is obvious. I mean, you know, manufacturing adds value to activities. Now, the problem is that when you move to an entirely service economy, these productivity gains are harder to get. And we have been destroying our manufacturing sector, all except for Germany. Germany has resisted this remarkably well. But in England, the manufacturing sector is virtually gone. And so we rely on services, and we rely on the idea it doesn't matter what you produce as long as someone wants to buy it. Well, that is true in one sense, but at what price do they want to buy it? And so I think the expansion of the service sector has actually been accompanied by a depression of real incomes over large amounts of society, because a lot of service jobs are actually very badly paid, not in the financial sector, but in many of the rest of it.
That's how the inequalities rise because of this, because of many people work on finance and just a few earn a lot and the others go down like for salaries income. Greg.
I mostly side with Sadelsky on these issues. I mean, just an example of what it looks like in the United States for the young people that I think about. I don't think about whether kids are bored in university. A few years ago, I looked at what I think is sort of an archetypal American community, and I think very true in Europe and across the global Rust Belt. In this case, it was a suburb of Chicago named Cicero, Illinois, famous. That's where Al Capone hid out in the 1920s. Today, it's 88% Hispanic. It's 48% foreign-born Mexicans who've moved to the United States. And there is no manufacturing base there. Once upon a time, they actually had the largest factory complex of what was AT&T, Ma Bell. But today, when you go there, you notice that there are 5 or 6 families living in single-family homes built for German and Polish factory workers. They have multiple cars because they have to commute to dead-end service jobs in the suburban periphery of it. They're not commuting to the core using mass transit and keeping transportation costs down. And in the financial crisis in 2008, when during the U.S. mortgage, Hispanics in the United States lost like 1/3 of their household wealth because they invested overly in their homes, thinking it was a reliable store of value. So we've seen in the United States, this tide of immigration there has been devastated by these circumstances, and I don't find much cause for optimism in what we're hearing here about reorganizing work. And I think it's interesting you mentioned Larry Summers there. When you read Larry Summers talk about recommendations about what to do in the face of automation, his advice echoes what the World Bank used to tell emerging economies. Invest in people, retrain. Like bromides of basic entrepreneurship. And I think it doesn't match up because I think Lord Skidelsky made it clear earlier. Like it is easier for us to imagine a algorithmic overlord than it is to us imagine changing the circumstances of neoliberalism that has led us to this. In the 1950s, they used to speculate that what would we do when the robots had reduced us to a 5-hour work week because the robots were producing everything we needed. I think we need to rethink those measures. And as one point of this, I guess the part where I slightly disagree with you on about manufacturing.
That's left the World Bank.
Yes, well, the one thing about manufacturing is from a U.S. perspective, we know that the United States has lost much of its critical technology edge because we have exported it wholesale to China. Only Apple even designs its products in the United States there. So we know it's essential to creating that ecosystem of services. But to me, the question is, can you still create mass employment through manufacturing? And like that, I'm a little less certain about because you do need a critical beachhead to create those next generation services around it. But it's based on the productivity gains in manufacturing. It's hard to imagine that you could put 30 million people to work in a.
I'm uncertain about that.
No.
By the way, of manufacturing base, let me talk about my country. Italy is said to have resisted the first wave of the crisis ignited by the subprime story in America in 2008 because of its strong manufacturing base. Then the crisis became too deep, and so even Italy fell in depression. Recession is going out just now. But anyway, it's important to have a manufacturing base in a country. Oh, I see here that, with my surprise, that time is over, and I expect to have time to give the word to the audience. I don't know if, Jean-Paul, tell me a word of truth. We have 10 minutes more to have some questions from the audience, or not? If there.
Questions.
Okay,
Two or three
questions. Okay.
Quick questions.
Quick questions. Just questions, not statements.
Anybody in the room would like to ask a question?
Question.
Anybody there? Yes, madam. Wait for the mic. Thank you.
I'm Denise Kingsmill. The thing I'd like to ask is the way in which we talk about workers, but actually the role of the worker is to be a consumer, isn't it? Because isn't that what keeps the world going round and round? And that the point that Robert makes about wages, I think, is very important, because quite honestly, I sit on a number of international boards and we don't talk about employees. We talk about costs. When we talk about how do we reduce costs in order that we can pay dividends. And I think this is a point that we've missed in this discussion, is this huge move from labor to capital, the movement from the rewards of labor to the rewards of capital. And as long as we keep on just, this equality issue is probably at the core of the future of work, really.
I think that the trend in compensation is through productivity. Companies won't raise the base salary, probably inflation, probably. And then all the compensation will be related to productivity and efficiency and the value added to the company. And that's the trend. So the more you contribute to the profitability of the company, the more you will earn. Well, I said that is a trend that I see with my clients.
Yeah, well,
The base salary are not raising, it's all about productivity and efficiency.
yeah, but productivity gains doesn't. Yeah.
Dividends to the investors rather than to the employees. Productivity rises,
And
wages remain
yeah,
constant.
but let me add something. If an employer finds a talent that is difficult to find, in the survey that we did, they are they will pay until 22% more to retain that talent if they have the skills that they need. If it is an average talent, they won't care.
Yeah, I think I do agree with Lady Kingsmill. Ricardo noted this a long, long time ago. Cost reduction means mainly wage reduction. I mean, reduction of the wage bill, put it that way. It can come about through actually sacking people, or it can come about through reducing their wages. I mean, it's not the only element of cost, but it's a major element of cost. So when people talk about cost reduction, and companies are driven by that, then they have to ask, well, where is the demand for other products to come from if you're reducing the purchasing power of people? And that's what's been going on. And that's why actually people like Larry Summers talk about secular stagnation. We've lost the base of consumption, or the base of consumption is eroding. And what keeps it going actually is advertising and sort of trying to drive people to buy more and more things. And I think that's an unhealthy basis for a society.
Also cost of machines, efficiency. So that's cost. Isaac.
I will take your challenge, and I'm very glad that you joined the chorus of people who denounce what is called the financiarization of economy. And what is it? It is that financial markets define at some point that you need to have 12% EBITDA. Then the boards on which you sit and executive boards, they design, that's their competence, right? All kind of processes, manufacturing, sales, and so on, that on the paper produce this 12% EBITDA. Then come in the resources, financial, material, and the last resource that come in, it's called human. That's why it's also the variable which you adjust when EBITDA is not there. What I'm talking about, and again, I am clear this is today a minor phenomenon, but in this company they start with human beings. They start with human beings. They start with their needs that traditional corporation ignores because they are resources. When you start with human being needs and you create an environment where these psychological needs are satisfied, not physiological. We'll talk about Maslow if you want after the conversation. But psychological needs. These people are self-motivated. Then they are at 100% at the top of their potential. Then they create economic value that you can share at the end. You need to create before you're sharing. That's not ideology, that's common sense.
Other questions? I see the participants to the next panel which are pushing.
This is a short question, but it could be a long answer or a short answer. I feel and I see that the panel is, as one would say in English, completely lopsided. I think most people understand that word. Why isn't there any representative from Japan, other than Dentsu, but you haven't talked about Dentsu at all, from Japan and from South Korea, who have also the same problem, to see how they have solved the problem or are solving the problem? Why is it that Samsung and LG and people like that make such huge profits and yet keep a huge workforce quite happy, as I understand? Thank you.
Ce que je peux répondre sur le Japon, c'est qu'effectivement, il suffit d'aller se déplacer au Japon pour voir qu'il y a quasiment du plein emploi et que la qualité de service est juste exceptionnelle. Alors ça a posé quelques problèmes par le passé pour un certain nombre d'entreprises dans leur mutation, parce que les hiérarchies étaient tellement figées qu'ils avaient du mal aussi à renouveler un certain nombre de leurs cadres. Ils sont en train de s'ouvrir à des méthodes, je dirais, de recrutement et de sortie de collaborateurs qui sont plus proches de celles que l'on a, tout en ayant un gap culturel énorme par rapport à notre façon de travailler. Mais il y a dans leurs valeurs la volonté que chacun puisse bénéficier du bien commun. Et ça, je pense que c'est d'abord culturel, c'est d'abord dans les valeurs qu'il faut aller chercher la différence entre le modèle japonais et nos modèles occidentaux.
That was a very good question, in my view, and Japan is a very interesting case. I mean, just one thing about Japan, I think there's much, income and wealth inequality is less in Japan than it is in the United States and in Europe, most countries in Europe.
Même les Allemands ont réussi quand même à robotiser très significativement leur industrie. C'est aussi l'effort qui a été porté qui fait qu'il y a eu moins de délocalisation qu'ailleurs et qu'aujourd'hui, avec la qualité, ils continuent à recruter dans l'industrie manufacturière.
Eh bien, merci à tous. Merci Eugenio, merci pour cette session sur la place du travail dans la société.